November 27, 1944, dawn broke over Ely Field, Saipan, casting a pale light across rows of B-29 superfortresses. These aluminum giants, each valued at $600,000 and capable of reaching Tokyo, had been symbols of American air power. Yet that morning, the symbols of strength lay in ruins. Japanese aircraft had struck during the pre-dawn hours, catching the base unprepared. Flames licked the sky as 3 B-29s burned where they had once stood proud on the runway. Another 11 were damaged, their wings twisted, fuselages dented, engines smoldering, a silent testament to the ferocity of the raid. The devastation was immediate, raw, and threatening to halt operations that could decide the fate of the Pacific campaign. At the edge of a jagged 20-foot crater, Brigadier General Haywood S. Hansell surveyed the aftermath. The steel matting that formed the runway had been torn apart, the coral foundation beneath splintered by the blast. He saw not only the destruction but the stakes. Each minute that passed increased the risk for the pilots returning from raids over Tokyo. Their B-29s, loaded with incendiaries, would soon be low on fuel, some damaged by flak or enemy fighters. If the runway was not repaired, crews would have no choice but to attempt water landings in the unforgiving Pacific, an almost certain death sentence. On the ground, the construction battalions, known as the Seabees, moved with methodical urgency. Over 100 men, disciplined and practiced, navigated the chaos with a singular focus: restore the runway. They lifted twisted panels of perforated steel, each weighing over 60 pounds, and replaced them with precision. Hooks engaged slots, panels clicked into place, and the clang of steel on steel echoed across the pre-dawn darkness. Every motion was a race against time, every decision a question of life or death. Hansell watched as men worked in orchestrated chaos, sweat mingling with the ash and dust of destruction. 40 minutes, that was the target. 40 minutes to take a bombed-out crater and transform it back into a runway capable of supporting the heaviest bombers in the American arsenal. Failure was unthinkable. The Seabees moved with the unflinching resolve of soldiers, aware that their labor, though not glamorous, would save lives and sustain the offensive that could bring Japan to its knees. In that moment, Ely Field was more than a base. It was a crucible where precision, courage, and ingenuity would confront destruction, and where the fate of returning airmen hung on the shoulders of men with hammers and steel planks. The scene at Ely Field was a testament to precision under pressure. The Japanese raid had left a scar across the runway, a jagged crater disrupting the carefully laid Marston mat that had taken weeks to install. Brigadier General Hansell understood the stakes immediately. Each B-29 bomber returning from the Tokyo raid was low on fuel, engines strained, some carrying battle damage from anti-aircraft fire. There was no margin for error. The runway had to be operational in minutes, or men would die at sea. The construction battalions, the Seabees, approached the task with a discipline born of necessity. Over 100 men were deployed in organized teams, each trained to execute a single mission: restore the runway. The key to this rapid recovery was the ingenious innovation of the Marston mat, or perforated steel planking PSP. Each panel measured 10 feet long and 15 inches wide, weighing 66 pounds, and contained 87 precisely punched holes. These holes were not merely for drainage. They reduced weight, maintained structural integrity, and allowed one soldier to lift and position the panels with relative ease. The interlocking hooks and slots along each edge made assembly almost modular, a runway in a box that could be deployed or repaired with minimal tools, a sledgehammer, and sheer manpower. The operation unfolded like a well-rehearsed choreography. Teams of 4 men lifted damaged panels from the cratered section and carried them away, careful not to disturb neighboring planks that remained intact. Hooks disengaged from slots, and the twisted steel was set aside. Fresh panels were then transported from pre-positioned stockpiles, each strategically located every 1,000 feet along the airstrip to minimize delay. The panels were slotted into place with a crisp, metallic click, steel striking steel, in a rhythm that echoed across the pre-dawn field. Meanwhile, the coral base beneath the planking required attention. The blast had not only shattered the metal, but displaced the coral foundation itself. Dump trucks and wheelbarrows brought crushed coral to the site, and crews spread and leveled it meticulously. filling gaps and ensuring a stable subgrade. Once the panels were in position, a steamroller made multiple passes, compacting the coral and locking the planking into a solid, continuous surface. The process from clearing damaged panels to final compaction was timed to the minute. 40 minutes from bomb crater to operational runway. Time became tangible in every movement. Hansel watched as the last panel was tapped into place, the interlocking system securing the mat into a uniform plane stretching across the formerly scarred section. The clang of steel faded into the hum of readiness. 40 minutes had passed, a lifetime in wartime urgency, and yet the repair was flawless. The runway, which mere hours earlier had been a death trap for returning bombers, now bore the weight of American engineering, industrial ingenuity, and human endurance. The first B-29s returned within hours. Engines roared as the massive aircraft taxied onto the repaired section, tires gripping the perforated steel. Landing gear absorbed the impact, wings flexed against aerodynamic forces, and the bombers rolled safely to a stop. One by one, the fleet touched down, the pilots none the wiser that they had passed over what was only 40 minutes earlier a gaping crater. The operation had saved lives, preserved material, and ensured that the air campaign against Tokyo could continue without interruption. Marston Mat was more than a tool, it was a force multiplier. The simplicity of the system belied its strategic importance. Conventional concrete runways would have required weeks to pour, cure, and finish, and any bomb damage would have necessitated labor-intensive repairs. Here, in the chaos of the Pacific Theater, a live field demonstrated that mobility, speed, and adaptability could outweigh even the might of an adversary's bombs. The steel panels, light enough for one man to handle but strong enough to support 65-ton bombers, had converted vulnerability into operational resilience. As Hansel walked along the restored runway, boots ringing on the solid steel, he saw more than a repaired airstrip. He saw the embodiment of American industrial and logistical ingenuity, the quiet heroism of the Seabees, and the unglamorous yet decisive innovation that enabled the United States to project air power across the vast Pacific. Each panel, each interlocking hook, each man hammering a steel clip into place was a link in a chain that would carry the war to Tokyo and beyond. In 40 minutes, destruction had been reversed. In 40 minutes, the campaign continued. In 40 minutes, history had been shaped not by bombs or bullets, but by the precision, discipline, and sheer ingenuity of human hands armed with the humble Marston Mat. The story of Marston Mat began long before the roar of B-29 engines over the Marianas. In November 1941, deep in the humid forests of Camp McCall, North Carolina, a small team of Army Corps of Engineers was conducting a series of tests that would quietly revolutionize modern warfare. They were experimenting with perforated steel panels, designed to create temporary airfields in conditions where traditional construction was impossible. The initial prototypes were crude, heavy, and solid, capable of supporting aircraft, but impractical for rapid deployment. These panels were the seeds of what would become the M8 specification, the blueprint for a portable, interlocking runway system that could be installed under the most extreme conditions. The engineers drew lessons from European experimentation. British forces had tried heavy wire mesh for airstrips, while French engineers had experimented with steel chevron grids. Both designs were insightful but ultimately flawed for American needs. The British panels were too fragile to withstand the takeoffs and landings of heavy bombers, and any damage required painstaking repairs. The French models were robust but cumbersome, their weight and complexity incompatible with rapid deployment across the Pacific Islands. The U.S. team focused on creating a design that balanced strength, lightness, and speed of assembly, a modular solution that would allow unskilled labor to construct fully operational runways in days rather than months. The breakthrough came with perforations. Each M8 panel was 10 feet long, 15 inches wide, and made from 10-gauge low-carbon steel. 87 holes, precisely punched in 3 rows along the length of each plank, dramatically reduced the weight to 66 pounds per panel, a manageable load for a single soldier. Yet the design did more than lighten the burden. The flanged edges of each hole created a corrugated effect, enhancing the structural strength and distributing the weight of even the heaviest aircraft. Hooks along one edge and slots on the other allowed adjacent panels to interlock seamlessly, secured with simple steel clips. No welding or specialized tools were required, only a hammer, muscle, and coordination. The system was elegant, industrially scalable, and tailored to the realities of combat construction. By late 1941, the United States had begun producing Marston mat on an industrial scale. 2 factories initially rolled out 4 million square feet of pierced steel planking in a matter of months. As the nation mobilized for war, production expanded exponentially. Eventually, 29 facilities across the country were dedicated to manufacturing PSP, churning out panels in the millions. Over the course of World War II, approximately 2 million tons of Marston mat would be produced, enough steel to construct hundreds of temporary airfields, or, laid end-to-end, a runway stretching across continents. The speed and scale of production reflected a uniquely American industrial philosophy: mass-produced, standardized components designed for modular deployment and rapid problem-solving on the battlefield. The strategic value of Marston mat was immediately apparent. These panels could be transported in the cargo holds of Liberty ships, deployed by unskilled Seabees, and assembled in days, not weeks. They allowed the U.S. military to project air power into previously inaccessible regions: coral atolls, jungle clearings, frozen tundra, without the delays inherent in traditional construction. The interlocking steel panels provided a hardened surface capable of supporting the heaviest aircraft, from nimble P-38 fighters to 65-ton B-29 superfortresses, even under repeated landings and takeoffs. Damaged sections could be replaced individually, often in less than an hour, ensuring operational continuity even under enemy fire. Marston mat was more than a logistical innovation, it was a strategic multiplier. In the Pacific theater, the ability to establish airfields almost immediately after capturing territory allowed the United States to sustain relentless pressure on Japanese forces. The rapid deployment of Marston mat enabled the island-hopping campaign, the consolidation of air superiority, and the eventual establishment of bases for the strategic bombing of Japan. Without this simple, yet brilliantly engineered, perforated steel plank, the logistical achievements that defined the U.S. war effort in the Pacific might have been impossible. By the end of World War II, Marston mat had proven its worth not just in combat, but in the broader scope of military logistics. Its design principleless modularity, rapid assembly, strength-to-weight efficiency set a precedent for future military engineering. The M8 specification, refined through careful experimentation at Camp McCall and mass production across the United States, had transformed a humble steel plank into a cornerstone of American military success. The 2 million tons of PSP produced during the war were not merely sheets of metal, they were the foundation upon which victory in the Pacific was built. The true power of Marston mat revealed itself not in laboratories or factories, but on the shattered islands of the Pacific. As the United States adopted the island-hopping strategy, speed became the decisive factor. Victory no longer depended solely on capturing territory, but on how quickly that territory could be transformed into a functional base of air power. In this environment, traditional runway construction, requiring months of grading, paving, and curing, was a strategic liability. Marston mat changed the equation. The first major test came in 1942 on Guadalcanal, at Henderson Field. The airstrip was little more than compacted earth carved out of jungle terrain. Rain turned it into mud, and repeated aircraft operations quickly degraded its surface. Japanese forces understood its importance and bombed it relentlessly. Every crater threatened to ground American aircraft and hand air superiority back to the enemy. The Seabees moved in with Marston mat and fundamentally altered the battlefield. Within days, large sections of the dirt runway were reinforced with pierced steel planking. What had once been fragile became resilient. Bomb damage could be repaired overnight. Aircraft could land even during rainstorms. Henderson Field remained operational under constant attack, not because it was untouched, but because it could be restored faster than it could be destroyed. This pattern repeated across the Pacific. By 1944, the the strategic stakes had escalated dramatically. The introduction of the B-29 Superfortress transformed airfields from tactical assets into strategic weapons. These bombers required long, reinforced runways, typically between 8,500 and 9,000 feet, to operate safely. Constructing such infrastructure on remote coral islands would have been unthinkable without Marston Mat. On Saipan at Alai Field, the challenge was immense. The island's coral substrate was sharp, uneven, and unstable. Traditional concrete construction would have taken months, delaying bombing operations against Japan. Instead, Seabees graded the coral, compacted it with heavy rollers, and laid down vast quantities of Marston Mat. The runway was not merely repaired, it was expanded, reinforced, and hardened to support the continuous operation of B-29s. Even after Japanese air raids damaged sections of the field, repairs could be completed in hours. The airfield remained active while still under threat, a logistical feat that stunned both allies and adversaries. Tinian and Guam represented the culmination of this strategy. These islands were transformed into some of the largest air bases in the world. Entire landscapes were reshaped to accommodate hundreds of B-29 bombers, with multiple parallel runways, extensive taxiway networks, and massive parking aprons, all built using Marston Mat as a foundational element. Miles of pierced steel planking connected runways to maintenance areas, fuel depots, and bomb storage sites. Aircraft could land, taxi, refuel, rearm, and take off again in a continuous flow. The bases functioned not as static installations, but as living systems designed for relentless output. The scale was unprecedented. On Tinian alone, the airfield supported sustained bombing campaigns that reached the Japanese home islands. These operations would have been impossible without runways capable of rapid repair and continuous use. Concrete cracked. Asphalt failed under stress. Marston Mat endured, flexible enough to absorb impact, modular enough to be replaced section by section, and strong enough to support the heaviest aircraft of the war. Strategically, the implications were profound. The island-hopping campaign depended on momentum. Every captured island had to be converted into an operational airbase before the next assault. Marston Mat compressed this timeline dramatically. What once required several months of engineering effort could now be accomplished in a matter of days. Air superiority followed quickly, isolating enemy positions and paving the way for further advances. The enemy could destroy runways, but they could not destroy time faster than the Seabees could rebuild. This ability to rapidly establish, restore, and maintain airfields became a silent weapon of the Pacific War. It allowed the United States to project power across vast distances, leapfrogging fortified positions and striking directly at strategic targets. The war in the Pacific was not won by territory alone, it was won by logistics, engineering, and speed. Marston Mat turned islands into launch pads almost overnight. It converted devastation into functionality. And in doing so, it redefined modern warfare. Airfields were no longer permanent monuments of concrete and stone. They became temporary, adaptable, and disposable, rebuilt as fast as the front lines moved. In the Pacific, victory belonged not just to those who captured ground, but to those who could make that ground work immediately. Marston Mat made that possible. The Pacific theater of World War II was not only a battlefield of fire and steel, but also a contest of endurance and logistics. For every island captured, every airfield established, Japanese forces responded with relentless determination. Bombers and fighters struck without warning, attempting to destroy the very infrastructure that allowed American air power to dominate. Alai Field on Saipan, Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, and the sprawling complexes of Tinian and Guam were constant targets. Each attack threatened to halt the strategic momentum of the United States, to turn hard-won territory into a liability. Yet, through ingenuity, preparation, and sheer determination, the Seabees, the U.S. Navy construction battalions, turned potential disaster into opportunity. When a Japanese bomb hit the runway, the consequences could be catastrophic. A single 500-pound bomb could rip through steel, displace coral, and render a critical section of runway unusable. If a B-29 returning from a mission could not land safely, lives were lost, aircraft destroyed, and the strategic mission jeopardized. Time, quite literally, was life. Yet the Seabees had a plan. A team of 100 to 150 men could repair a bomb crater in just 40 minutes. These crews operated with precision, moving as a single organism, each soldier trained in the choreography of destruction and repair. Tools were simple sledgehammers, steel clips, and manpower, but the results were extraordinary. The process was both methodical and astonishingly fast. Damaged Marston mat panels were removed and set aside. Replacement panels, weighing 66 pounds each and measuring 10 feet by 15 inches, were transported from preposition stockpiles along the runway. Four-man teams carried, aligned, and locked them into place using the interlocking hooks and slots that defined the design. Coral aggregate was dumped into the crater, graded, and compacted by steamrollers to ensure a stable foundation. Within minutes, the runway transformed from a cratered death trap into a surface capable of handling the heaviest bombers in the world. The clang of steel on steel rang through the early morning and late night hours, a mechanical symphony of resilience and resolve. The Japanese quickly learned that no attack could permanently disable these fields. Every attempt to crater a runway was met with immediate repair. Henderson Field, for example, endured repeated shelling and bombing during the Guadalcanal campaign, yet air operations continued uninterrupted. Pilots returning from sorties could rely on landing strips that were restored faster than any crew could have imagined. At Alai Field on Saipan, despite repeated attacks from G-4M Betty bombers and A-6M0 fighters, the runway was operational almost immediately after each strike. The American advantage in the air was maintained, not only through the might of the aircraft themselves but through the unseen, relentless labor of these construction battalions. This continuous cycle of attack and repair demanded more than strength. It required endurance, coordination, and innovation. Crews worked around the clock in tropical heat, rain and mud, often under enemy fire. They adapted to new challenges, diffused unexploded ordnance, stabilized shifting coral, and compensated for damage inflicted by successive waves of bombing. The modular nature of Marston mat was critical. Panels could be individually replaced without disturbing the surrounding sections, making repairs faster and more efficient. Even under the stress of combat, the system held, providing a reliable platform for operations that were often the difference between victory and defeat. The effect on the war was profound. American air power could be projected further, faster, and more reliably than Japanese planners anticipated. Airfields were no longer static targets, they were dynamic, self-healing systems. B-29s continued to strike Japan with precision, sustaining the strategic bombing campaign that would cripple industrial production and morale. Fighters maintained air superiority over the islands, providing cover for ground forces and supporting the island-hopping campaign. All of this was possible because the Seabees, in combination with the ingenuity of Marston mat, ensured that the United States could fight and maintain operational readiness simultaneously. In essence, the battle was not just fought in the skies, but on the ground beneath the aircraft wheels. Every repaired crater, every replaced panel, was an act of strategic defiance. It demonstrated that American victory depended as much on logistics, maintenance, and innovation as it did on firepower. The Japanese could attack, but they could not break the system. American forces would rebuild faster than it could be destroyed, and the war in the Pacific moved inexorably toward Allied victory. The 40-minute repair rule became legendary, a symbol of American tenacity. It exemplified the broader principle that logistics, speed, and adaptability could dictate the outcome of war. Through constant vigilance, tireless labor, and revolutionary engineering, the United States maintained air superiority over the Pacific, turning every challenge into a testament of ingenuity and endurance. The Seabees and Marston mat did not merely sustain air operations, they sustained the very momentum that would ultimately decide the fate of the Pacific War. By late 1944, the Pacific theater had reached a pivotal moment. The capture of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam provided the United States with forward airfields within striking distance of the Japanese home islands. From these bases, the new B-29 Superfortress bombers, symbols of American industrial might and technological superiority, could unleash their devastating payloads across Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, and countless other cities. Yet these aircraft, each weighing 65 tons fully loaded with fuel and bombs, required long, sturdy runways capable of supporting repeated takeoffs and landings. Without them, even the most advanced bombers were grounded. It was here that Marston Mat, the seemingly humble perforated steel planking, proved to be a decisive instrument of victory. The scale of the operations was staggering. From Saipan alone, dozens of B-29s departed in coordinated waves, their engines droning across the early morning skies as they ascended toward Japan. Tinian's North Field accommodated hundreds of bombers, interconnected by 6 miles of taxiways and extensive hard stands. Guam followed suit, forming an intricate network of air power projection that the Japanese could neither match nor anticipate. The key to this success was not just the aircraft, but the infrastructure that allowed them to operate efficiently and continuously. Within days of capturing an island, the Seabees would lay thousands of feet of Marston Mat over crushed coral, transforming raw battlefield terrain into operational airbases capable of sustaining the heaviest aircraft in the world. These airfields enabled an unprecedented tempo of operations. Strategic bombing raids struck industrial centers, shipyards, and transportation hubs, systematically dismantling Japan's ability to wage war. Tokyo's factories and ports, vital to the production of military equipment, were leveled. Nagoya and Osaka suffered repeated incursions, crippling steel production and aviation manufacturing. Each raid, meticulously planned and executed, depended on the rapid turnaround of bombers at their forward bases. Fueling, rearming, and maintenance all hinged on the integrity of the runways. A single damaged strip could delay an entire mission, yet the Marston Mat system rendered such delays almost impossible. Within 40 minutes of a bomb strike, CB crews repaired craters and restored operational capacity, ensuring that American air power never faltered. The psychological and strategic effects were equally profound. Japanese planners, accustomed to assuming months of construction time for airfields, were blindsided by the speed at which the United States could establish, expand, and maintain operational bases. The ability to strike Japan repeatedly without the risk of prolonged downtime forced a constant state of defensive vigilance. Cities were unable to recover between attacks, industrial production lagged, and Japanese morale deteriorated under relentless pressure. The chain of strategic impact was clear. Rapid construction enabled sustained air operations, which in turn amplified the effectiveness of each bombing campaign. Marston Mat's role extended beyond mere convenience. It was a force multiplier. By standardizing construction, reducing labor requirements, and allowing unskilled personnel to deploy runways in days rather than months, it magnified the United States' industrial and military advantage. The B-29 campaign, often perceived as a testament to American aerial technology, was in fact inseparable from the logistical genius embodied in these steel planks. Without them, the bases on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam could never have supported the volume and frequency of sorties that ultimately devastated Japan's war infrastructure. By mid-1945, the results were undeniable. Entire cities lay in ruins, transportation networks were crippled, and Japan's capacity to continue the war was systematically dismantled. Marston Mat had enabled more than just the physical deployment of aircraft. It had facilitated the projection of sustained, decisive air power. The Pacific Campaign demonstrated a broader lesson: victory in modern warfare often depends not solely on weapons themselves, but on the infrastructure that supports and multiplies their effectiveness. In this, the perforated steel planks were as critical as the bombers they supported. The legacy of these efforts extended beyond the immediate war. The success of the B-29 campaign showcased the power of rapid construction, modular design, and adaptive logistics. Marston Mat was repurposed post-war for civilian applications, yet its true contribution lay in its role as a strategic enabler. By ensuring that American bombers could strike relentlessly and safely, it helped bring about Japan's surrender, proving that sometimes the simplest solutions, 87 holes punched in steel, can decisively shape the outcome of history. The technical genius of Marston Mat lay in its elegant simplicity and remarkable adaptability. The standard M8 steel panels measured 10 feet in length and 15 inches in width, each weighing a manageable 66 pounds. Yet this seemingly modest sheet of steel could bear up to 125,000 pounds, more than sufficient to support the heaviest bombers of World War II, including the formidable B-29 Superfortress. Engineers meticulously designed 87 precisely punched perforations in each panel, not merely for weight reduction, but to enhance structural integrity through a corrugated effect. The holes also served functional purposes, facilitating drainage, reducing dust, and ensuring traction for landing aircraft. These features allowed the mat to perform reliably on coral, sand, mud, or frozen tundra, where traditional runways would have been impossible or prohibitively slow to construct. The M9 aluminum variant emerged later in the war as a lighter alternative, weighing only 32 pounds per panel. While its load-bearing capacity was lower than that of steel, the aluminum version offered critical advantages in weight-sensitive situations, particularly for forward-deployed airfields where rapid installation was essential and durability could be traded for speed. In both versions, the interlocking system of hooks and slots allowed unskilled personnel to lay panels quickly and securely, with steel clips providing additional reinforcement. No specialized tools were required beyond sledgehammers, allowing the design to leverage the immense manpower of the U.S. military efficiently. Installation speed was one of the most decisive factors in the wartime effectiveness of Marston Mat. Experienced CB teams could lay a 6,000-foot runway in roughly 4.5 days, a pace unimaginable for conventional concrete construction, which would require weeks or even months to cure. Smaller runways, such as the 3,000-foot strips used on remote islands, could be completed in less than 72 hours from the moment materials arrived on site. Repair time after bomb damage was equally impressive. A 500-pound bomb crater could be patched in just 40 minutes by a 100 to 150-man crew. The combination of rapid deployment and rapid repair transformed airfield construction into a strategic weapon, enabling sustained offensive operations even under enemy fire and adverse environmental conditions. The global applicability of the system was equally remarkable. Beyond the Pacific, Marston Mat demonstrated its utility in the European theater. During the Normandy invasion, Army Air Forces engineers laid temporary airfields on beaches and inland areas to facilitate close air support for advancing ground forces, significantly accelerating the Allied advance. In the Berlin airlift of 1948-1949, Marston Mat reinforced runways at Tempelhof Airport, allowing C-47 and C-54 transports to deliver critical supplies efficiently, demonstrating its value in post-war logistics. Decades later, descendants of the system, including AM2 aluminum matting, were used in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and other conflict zones, proving the enduring relevance of the original design philosophy: rapid, modular, and resilient runway construction under challenging conditions. The design reflected a profound understanding of both engineering and logistics. By standardizing panels and production methods across 29 factories in the United States during World War II, military planners ensured a steady supply of runway material capable of supporting hundreds of airfields simultaneously. Approximately 2 million tons of pierced steel planking were produced over the course of the war, sufficient to construct countless runways and tactical installations worldwide. Each panel was lightweight enough for a single soldier to handle repeatedly, yet strong enough to withstand repeated landings of the largest bombers. The mathematical precision of the design, balancing weight, strength, and modularity, embodied the American approach to problem-solving industrial mass production applied to tactical necessity. Marston Mat's statistical and technical achievements were not abstract, they directly enabled operational success. Airfields could be built faster than the enemy anticipated, repaired in hours rather than weeks, and adapted to virtually any terrain. The perforated steel panels may have appeared mundane compared to tanks, bombers, or battleships, yet they were a decisive element in projecting American air power across the globe. From the jungles of the Solomon Islands to the frozen Arctic of Greenland, from the beaches of Normandy to the post-war airlift in Berlin, the simple yet sophisticated engineering of Marston Mat proved that victory often depended not only on firepower, but on the capacity to move, sustain, and repair forces faster than the adversary could respond. The true power of Marston Mat lay not in firepower, nor in the aircraft it supported, but in its revolutionary approach to logistics. While historians often emphasize bombers, battleships, and fighter planes when recounting World War II, the decisive factor in the Pacific theater was the ability to project air power rapidly and reliably across vast oceanic distances. Marston Mat transformed the fundamental problem of warfare, how to place forces where they were needed most, into a manageable, repeatable solution. A simple sheet of perforated steel became the linchpin of American operational strategy, enabling the construction of bomber-capable runways in days rather than months, even in the most remote and inhospitable locations. This logistical innovation fundamentally altered the balance of power. By late 1944, the United States could establish functional airfields almost as fast as ground forces could capture territory. Saipan's Alai Field, Tinian's North Field, and Guam's sprawling B-29 bases exemplified this capability. Hundreds of bombers could be stationed, fueled, armed, and maintained within weeks, while Japanese defensive planners struggled to anticipate where the next American strike would originate. The speed of deployment and the capacity for rapid repair meant that even when enemy bombs cratered runways, air operations could continue uninterrupted. A 500-pound bomb hit could be patched in under 40 minutes, preserving air superiority in the face of relentless attacks. Here, victory was determined not only by firepower, but by the ability to move, sustain, and repair forces faster than the adversary could respond. The strategic significance of Marston Mat extended beyond the Pacific. In the European theater, the system enabled Allied forces to create forward-operating airstrips for tactical air support, accelerating the advance after D-Day. Post-war, Marston Mat's utility continued in crises such as the Berlin airlift, where temporary steel runways allowed C-47 and C-54 transports to sustain West Berlin during the Soviet blockade. The principle was consistent by standardizing modular components and mass-producing them. Military planners could overcome natural and logistical obstacles, projecting power wherever needed. The MATs demonstrated that operational flexibility and speed of deployment often mattered more than the sophistication of individual weapon systems. Beyond the battlefield, Marston Mat left a tangible legacy in civilian life. After the war, millions of panels were repurposed by communities around the globe. In the Philippines, sections became durable fencing. In Papua New Guinea, mats were transformed into walls and gates. In Italy and France, they reinforced roads and pathways. The steel's corrosion-resistant properties allowed these wartime artifacts to endure for decades, serving practical purposes long after the guns fell silent. Yet while these civilian applications illustrate ingenuity and sustainability, they pale compared to the strategic lesson embedded in the design's success. In modern warfare is often dictated by logistics, speed, and adaptability. Marston Mat symbolized a shift in military thinking. It proved that industrial capability and engineering innovation could become force multipliers, equaling or surpassing the impact of conventional weaponry. The ability to rapidly construct and repair airfields changed the calculus of military planning. No longer was geography an insurmountable barrier. The limiting factor became the capacity to mobilize materials and manpower. The mats, laid panel by panel across coral, sand, mud, and ice, exemplified an American approach that valued practicality, scalability, and repeatability. Every perforation, every interlocking hook, every standardized dimension reflected a philosophy that placed strategic utility above all else. Ultimately, Marston Mat's legacy is profound and enduring. It demonstrates that in modern warfare, logistics is not a backdrop to combat, it is combat. The mats enabled the U.S. to dominate the skies over the Pacific, sustain operations in Europe, and project power globally. They also offer a timeless lesson: the simplest solutions, applied intelligently and at scale, can decisively shape history. 2 million tons of perforated steel may have seemed unremarkable, but laid across islands and battlefields, it paved the road to victory. The strategic value of Marston Mat endures. a testament to ingenuity, discipline, and the quiet power of logistics over brute force. The victory in the Pacific did not come solely from bombs dropped or ships sunk. It came from speed, precision, and the ability to sustain forces under relentless pressure. The Marston mat, a simple 66-pound steel plank, became emblematic of this principle. It demonstrated that in modern warfare, the decisive advantage often lies not in raw firepower, but in smart, adaptable, and rapid solutions. By enabling airfields to be built and repaired in days, the mats allowed the United States to project overwhelming air power across thousands of miles of ocean, maintaining pressure on Japanese positions while the enemy struggled to respond. The strategic genius was not in the technology alone, but in its application industrial efficiency meeting tactical necessity. Every perforation, every interlocking hook, and every standardized panel contributed to a system that could be deployed by unskilled labor, yet deliver results that reshaped the course of a war. From Saipan to Tinian, from Guam to the Solomon Islands, Marston mat turned islands into forward operating bases, making speed and flexibility more lethal than the heaviest bomb or the fastest battleship. The lessons of this innovation extend far beyond World War II. They illustrate a fundamental truth about both conflict and human endeavor. The smartest solutions, executed efficiently and reliably, often outweigh brute force. As we reflect on these feats, there is a broader lesson for today. In any challenge, whether on the battlefield, in business, or in daily life, speed, preparation, and clever problem-solving can achieve results that raw effort alone cannot. The ingenuity displayed by the Seabees, the engineers, and the planners behind Marston mat reminds us that logistics, the quiet, often unseen systems, can determine outcomes as decisively as any front-line action. This story invites us to think about the unseen forces that shape history. It encourages us to value innovation, teamwork, and the courage to apply simple solutions under pressure. Just as the Marston mat allowed the United States to dominate the skies of the Pacific, strategic thinking and resourceful execution can allow us to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles in our own lives. If this account of ingenuity, logistics, and determination inspires you, join the conversation. Like this video to support the uncovering of hidden historical innovations. Comment below to share your thoughts on how smart solutions have changed the course of history, or even your own experiences where preparation and speed made all the difference. And don't forget to subscribe to follow more stories that reveal the remarkable ideas, people, and strategies behind the events that shaped the modern world. Every view, comment, and subscription helps us bring history's hidden lessons to light, proving that sometimes the simplest tools create the most profound impact.